Alrighty, and welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today I am going to be doing an all-about arena breakdown. I only have 17 minutes left, so hopefully I'll be able to get this done during the time. There's a lot to talk about in this one. So there's going to be three main points I am going to cover this. One is going to be what are the meta teams for the top PvP. One aspect is going to be what kinds of timings and formations and characters you'll be using, and the last thing is how to climb the leaderboard. So to start things off, I'm going to just talk about what are the different types of comps, where I see them most often, and what kinds of things you should be using. So I guess I'll just start with refreshing a couple of them. The one I am currently running is double tank, double mage, and a healer. And this is a charge up formation, and this is probably the first meta or the best offensive meta that you will see in the top 100, top 50 ranks. So I'm just going to refresh a couple of times so you can see what other kinds of comps there are up here. So that was the first kind of meta you'll see. The second kind of meta will be the best defensive meta, and it'll be something like this, where it'll generally be a Stan, and then the three that will be there are Big Boned, Kirito, and Nippleman, and then the fourth person is kind of a flex fix. It'll either be something like Mr. Darcy, Foxy, sometimes Winsummers, sometimes even Meme Master, very rarely, but it'll generally be these three characters as the core, and then the tank, and then the other fifth pick. This would say would be the best defensive team. So it's once you've reached the first spot, then you have something like this because it's very strong in defense. And then you have another kind, which I haven't seen it pop up here yet. I'm going to refresh just a couple more times while I talk about it, but it's going to be a type that will be using garbage deeps as the other one. And this one is probably the least common. It's probably more of a top 100 rather than a top 50. It's still viable in the top 50, but it's just a little bit harder due to the nature of the timings and stuff. And here we have a garbage deep, and so this is kind of what it'll be. It'll be two mages, garbage deeps, tank, and then healer, but generally it'll be something like this. And so for these different kinds of comps, in this one you'll be running powered rangers. Sometimes you will be using charge up, but most of the time you'll be using the Powered Rangers formation. And if I go ahead and click here, this is kind of the formation it'll be going. I'm not exactly certain. I think it's one of the V shapes, just because the closer it is, the faster they get their attacks off, because the backline characters, they have to move forward most of the time before casting. Then if it's close enough like this, then aura characters like Winsummers can have a greater effect. And so the whole point of this type of composition with the Powered Rangers is so that you could get garbage deeps off, and basically you'll line attack like this, and it'll kill the damage dealers. Wherever they are, they will move the character before. So if my damage dealers were over here, they'd probably switch these two positions, and then they'd shoot through and kill my two damage dealers before Stan can get his, what is it called, his leader ability off. That's kind of how this kind of formation works. So then you just have a single front line just to take the couple of auto attacks. And then Zappy is a follow-up option, and then Toolshed here is for the aura, just to help finish everything else off. But this is kind of how it'll be running. The other kind of formation I talked about is probably the very first kind of meta, and this is probably the easiest meta to do, and it's the best offensive meta, in my opinion. And you'll run this using a charge-up formation. I've seen it used in this formation, the spread-out formation. I've also seen it used, I want to say the inverse V, similar to this. It's not as effective, but this is generally the best formation for it, and the positioning is going to be the same when you're attacking. Winsummers is going to be in this corner. I run Jaina here, but you could also use Toolshed and then you'll have Zappy in the middle, and then Healer's Adjust and Stan are going to be your front line. The position depends on where the enemy Stan is, or where the enemy characters are. So in this type of formation, because their main damage dealer is going to be Garbage Deeps and Zappy, and it's a powered ranger, I'll probably switch these off so I could get a stun off on Garbage Deeps, and then I will have Stan rely on being able to get his leader ability off before Zappy can attack. So this is the meta 1 formation that I see most often here. The other one is pretty much this exact same format, but then you will use instead, you will have Nipple Man, you will have Big Boned, and then you will have Kirito here, and then the other person is going to be Windsummers, and I'm going to switch Kirito here. Windsummers. Okay, it'll be something like this. Instead of the charge up, you will be doing Sugar High for the cooldown reduction. This isn't exactly it'll probably be something like Frontline is more common, but anyway, it'll run something like this, and then what they'll do, the whole purpose of this is you'll get quick attacks off, and you'll just plow through their front line and get some executes and some cooldown reductions off, and then the Sugar High formation bonus on top of that, and it's basically getting through the front line to quickly kill the backline characters. This has a very high damage potential as well, but I'd say it's better as a defensive formation just because it's very annoying to get off if you have the correct kind of Power Stones. So I'm going to refresh a couple of times if I could find somebody that is currently running this again. I totally missed that one there. So we'll go ahead and visit this one. So yeah, they're using this kind of formation, the cross. And so it's basically, it's going to plow through, and then they're going to plow through the sides. And it really depends on what kind of formation. This is the kind of formation I generally run, and so what happens is you have your 2 tanks. Once the tanks are gone, they go and kill your damage character, which is in the middle, and then afterwards your secondary damage support character doesn't often have enough damage to kill all of them in a single hit. So the way to counter that is to move, in my normal formation, I'd move my Zappy down here instead. And so that was the meta 2 formation. I'd say it's the top 50 best defense formation. So that's the top 3 formations you'll see here. Those are the ones that will be most common and most often used. So I'm going to talk about some of the other characters and the other formations you will have. There are a ton of them. And some of the formations will be Black Swordsman, Kirito, Zappy, Toolshed, and then it'll be Wind or Foxy, and then that'll either be in a Blood Rage formation or a Magic Slingers formation. And running that, I'd say it's probably a meta 4, where it's maybe a top 150. And let me go ahead and just go in and see what that would look like. So I said Big Boned, and then I said Kirito, and then I had Zappy, and then Toolshed. This is what you'll most often see. And then it runs in a Magic Slingers formation, or instead a Blood Rage formation. And so this is pretty good in climbing, just because it's fast attacks. And so if you are a higher level or have more power than a character like this, for example, this kind of formation would work better, because you can get faster attacks off, and then you can blow through their front line and kill their back lines. So this is a good climbing formation at sea. There's another style where you do Healer's Adjust. Let me find him. Uther is another one. And then, where's my Healer's Adjust? I probably passed it. Healer's Adjust, and then you will have a King of Games will be here in the back line, and then this will either be a Zappy, most likely, and a Windsummers, or a Foxy is another good choice in this kind of formation. And so this is what you do if you don't have a 6-star Stan with a level 6 leader ability, which is the primary carry for most of these top meta formations. And so this is another kind of formation, and what you do is you rely on the summons that King of Games can output, his 2 bulls, and then his 5-star triple dragons abilities. This is another formation you'll see quite often and quite commonly, just because Uther has a very good 2-cost ability, which you could spam, and that lowers these cooldowns for your actual DPS character, and then you rely on the HA, the Healer's Adjust stuns on their DPS character to have enough survivability to get off your Zappy's attack. This is a very good climbing formation. And let's go ahead and talk about another one you would use. Instead of these two characters, you would use a Black Swordsman for a quick attack. You will use Garbage Deeps, which mine unfortunately is not too high. I will also use Zappy here again, and then it'll be something like this. The formation, I don't even know what to call this. The positioning will be not quite like this. The inverse V is probably a better one for this, or even a V shape could be better for this, depending on where you're going. And so basically, I want to be doing it where I can do a straight line. I'll either put her here and go down this way, or put her here. This is probably the best, but the only issue is the healers adjust here. So probably I would switch Garbage Deeps over to here, and then move my Zappy probably to the back line. And then this kind of formation, I will be running the Charge Up or the Powered Rangers. Either one of them work. And the point is to kill whatever their main DPS character is using Garbage Deeps. This is another good climbing formation that you could use. Not necessarily in this position, this is just an example position, but the Charge Up works good here, and the Powered Rangers as well works well here. So this is another kind of formation you'll see. This is probably like a top 175 material. The last one I showed was a top 150. So another meta that I see when I was climbing is just any two tanks. You run Meme Master, and then you run Row, and then you rely on Zappy as your main carry. So we're gonna move Zappy here. And so this is another kind of formation that works very, very well, and it's very, very annoying because they both have stuns here, and then he could summon clones of himself at 5-star, and then at 5-star he could do resurrections, and Beam could do resurrections at 4-star. Tsubasa isn't as good unless you are grouped together, but then that gets you very vulnerable to AoE attack. And so the whole point of this kind of formation is a stall defensive formation. So this is another good climbing formation. I'd probably say it's like getting into the top 250. This is before you have stars. This is before you have your characters at maximum level, at maximum gear. This is the kind of formation you will most often come across. It has a kind of low damage potential just because if your Zappy gets killed, then that's it, and it's very difficult to do anything about it. But you have these two characters which can both res, and that could keep you in the game for a long time. And so it's about managing the timing, countering what they're going to do, and then getting off an optimal shot of Zappy's leader ability. And so these are the main kinds of formations that you will see. And sorry, I forgot to mention, you will use a charge up formation for this, just because the hard to kill isn't as useful, and the super shield as well isn't as useful for PvP. So that's all of the main comps that I see, and a little bit onto them. So I'm going to talk about a couple of other characters you could use, and these are mostly utility and flex characters. So Sterling Steel is a good one, just because she could do a lot of bleed attacks, and if you were going in a Magic Slingers formation, for example, that's a good choice for her, or even a Powered Rangers formation, that's a good choice for her. Another flex character is Black Swordsman. All these characters I'm talking about, you're going to use them if they are higher stars, higher gear, higher level than some of the other meta characters, which I just went over. So Black Swordsman is another good one. Guest is actually another surprise pick here. If you could get him going with his 2-star ability, he's very, very difficult to kill actually, and then he could get a stagger off, which you could use to help stall for a little bit. Or Mysterion, actually, he is my surprise pick here. He's very, very good with his little chi pool ability, where he pulls enemies to him. It's extremely good for stunning characters out of their attack animations and such. He's a very, very good one. And then my last pick I will mention here is Friendly Dude. He's here for his aura mostly on his 5-star, and he has heaps of different kinds of summons. And so mainly what you'll use him for is having his skeletons be bait for all of their attacks. So it's very good versus powered rangers formations, is very good versus magic slingers formations. It doesn't do so well versus enemies with charge up. It doesn't do so well. It does decently well versus Archer's Delight, and it doesn't do well versus Blood Rage. Other than that, it does well against several of the auto attack kinds of comps using him. So he's another flex pick. Spicy Meatball just does huge amounts of damage, and Lone Wolf could also do huge amounts of damage if you have their leader abilities leveled up in the very early ranks. The last character I want to mention, she's kind of a weird place, just because by the time you get here, you'll have your other meta characters built up, and so you won't need them as much. So Willow here, she kind of is in the same place as Spicy Meatball, where I'd rather just have any of these other characters. But Queen of Diamonds is my final choice here, just because all of her attacks are AoE. She could do self-buffing, and they actually do a lot of damage, and she could do a lot of different kinds of debuffs, which including silence and bleed and freeze. If you could get her going, and I'd mostly only use her against enemy comp that you're higher level and more power than, just because else her debuffs are going to be resisted. And so that is talking all about the different characters, all of the different comps, and everything here. And so there's one last thing I want to talk about here. I think it's already 7 o'clock, so I'm getting my rewards. I did not get to do my arena attempts today, but that's fine. Totally worth it for showing you guys here. The leaderboards here, right now, I think there's maybe 1,000 players in the game, at least doing PvP. And so it's fairly easy to get into gold. To get into platinum, that's a little bit of a slog. I think by the time you're level 50, or in between level 50 to 40, is about when you could start reaching that range depending on your characters. It's where I've gotten with all of my alt accounts, at least. And on my other alt account, I've been able to hit number 1 in arena using a level 37k power comp. That was all that. Another thing, I guess, I'm going to go ahead and show you some actual PvP and go a little bit more in depth into the timings and what kinds of things I'm looking for when I'm actually doing these battles. So I'm going to go with my standard composition, which is Healer's Adjust, Stan, Zappy, and then I actually prefer Jaina over Toolshed, just because in the way the positioning here works, Toolshed's aura ability isn't going to proc fast enough to have an effect before Zappy does her shot. And then I prefer Jaina's leader ability can be a quick stun interrupt, and it has a potential chance to freeze enemies, as well as her passive gives me an attack bonus here. And then my other choice is actually Windsummer's. For her 5-star ability can do cooldown reductions as well as just massive amounts of healing. Foxy is actually a very, very good choice here, just because she could cast Auto Resurrection. For my purposes, I have used Windsummers all the way to number 1, and so I'm going to continue to be using Windsummers all the way to number 1. So yeah, this is my formation, and there's one important thing I want to talk about before heading into here, and that is the Powerstones here. So you can see I have global cooldown reduction, global cooldown reduction, global cooldown reduction, some more hit points on all of these, global cooldown reduction. So you can see what is the theme here is global cooldown reduction. And if I go into all of my other characters, I think Zappy is a DPS character, so she's focused more on attack and global cooldown reduction, crit damage, crit rating, attack, crit rating, attack. And so there are 2 Power Stones that you're looking for here that are going to be very important for your PvP experience. Whatever your main damage character, you want them to have 2 different things. You want them to have attack, you want them to have global cooldown reduction, and you want them to have actual just cooldown. It's just different than global cooldown. So having global cooldown reduction, what that means is I am going to do an so let's say I'm going to use this ability first. I'm going to cast this first, and then I'm going to have a global cooldown of, say, 1 second. So I'm going to cast this, and then I'm going to do an auto attack for a second, and then I'm going to cast my next ability, then I'm going to do another auto attack, and then I'm going to do my next ability, whatever, so on and so forth. The global cooldown reduces the amount of time within here. So instead of it being 1 second, I'll cast this, and then it'll be, say, 0.75 of a second, and then I'll cast this, and it'll be 0.75 of a second. For purely PvP, global cooldown reduction is going to be very, very useful, in the sense that you're going to have, you'll be able to cast some of your bigger attacks for damage carry, like Zappy McZap, faster than the enemy team compositions will. And cooldown changes how fast this goes off of cooldown. So if it's a 5% reduction, instead of it being 10 seconds, it'll be like 9.5 seconds, as an example. So if you are facing an enemy Zappy, you're going to be able to cast your attack 0.5 of a second before the enemy will, which is a huge thing if you could one-shot them with a character like Zappy. And so that is the power of these Powerstones in early types of PvP, is you want global cooldown reduction, you want just a little bit of cooldown, and then you want attack and crit rating, as well as whatever your secondary choices. Say you don't have good Power Stones. But those are the three main types of stones you want for your damage carry. And so I'm going to go ahead, and we're just going to go ahead and do this person. And so what they are having here is a Magic Slinger's formation, and they're focused on this side. So the formation is one of the things you look on. You look on their positioning, and then you also look on the character composition. So when I'm climbing ranks, what I look at primarily is what is their team composition, because to me that tells me many things of what types of counters I'm going to have and what kinds of things. For my formation that I use, I know that the people who use the melee characters in the best defense, so Nippleman, Kirito, Big Boned, Foxy, and Stan, that is going to be the composition I am weakest against, because they could plow through my tanks and stuff faster than I could kill them. So that's the thing I'm going to avoid, because I know that is a good counter. And the other thing I want is I want to be able to have the high amounts. The power is the last thing I look at when fighting enemies, because the power doesn't matter so much, more so than the actual team composition here. So I'm going to fight this one, which is very similar to my own. The other thing is I always want to make sure my Stan is on the opposite side of the healer's adjust. If the healer's adjust is on the bottom, it's actually a better defensive team than if he's on the top, because his shout hits Zappy when he's on the bottom, but he doesn't hit Zappy if she's in the middle, if healer's adjust is on the top. So that's why I always put him on the top, because a lot of people will put their DPS character here and here, and so that means I don't have to worry about the top characters as much, because I could just focus on Stan here. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on my charge up, and then I'm going to enter in and show you a little bit on the power of the global cooldowns and the reductions as well. And so we're going to see they both cast their attack, and then they did their leader ability, and there. You could see mine is already starting charging, but they put their DPS character here in the back line, and so they were stunned by my healer's adjust. So that's going to be problematic for them. The other thing they did was, with this kind of formation, Stan cast his leader ability here. And so whenever I'm fighting Stan, what I do is I go in and check the character details, and I see for 7.47 more seconds, so about 142 is when I'm going to be able to do my damage rotations. And so what I do here is, because I don't have to worry about healer's adjust because he's in the top, I'm going to cast my Stan's leader ability after their Stan has cast their leader ability. If their healer's adjust was on the bottom, then I would cast my Stan right before, or right as I hit 4, because that's when healer's adjust will do his shout. And so I'm going to cast mine here after she's casting their attacks. And so that's another thing is, because this is a Magic Slinger's formation, they're going to cast their attacks faster, and so it's more important for me to get my leader ability off earlier. If they're using a charge up formation, they're going to charge their attacks, and it's going to take a while for it to cast, and so I could wait a little while, because healer's adjust is on the top. I don't have to worry about my Stan getting interrupted by anything until the second attack rotation when Jaina has a chance to freeze, so I can cast my ability then. So I have about 2 seconds left, and then I'm just gonna check just to be sure, and you could see they don't have any invincibility. So I could go ahead and cast my ability, and I always target the back line or whatever the damage dealing character is. And another thing is, I'm gonna cast this right as Zappy is about to cast her normal attack. And what that does is it puts it into a queue. So Zappy is gonna finish doing her chain lightning, and then my leader ability for Zappy is going to immediately cast afterwards. And what that does is it outputs extremely massive amounts of damage with Zappy. Just look at this damage. That was a single cast of her attack. You could see here, one chain lightning did 50% of this damage, 121,000 damage, and then her lightning storm finished off the remaining people, which were mostly tanks, for an additional 34% of the damage. And she did get off one lightning storm, which was the first initial cast. So if you look at this, about 98% of her damage came from a single cast of chain lightning and a single leader ability. This is the power of Zappy McZapZap. Once you have the right formation, the right stones, and the right counter comp. So this is why it is the best offense in the current meta. This is why Zappy is so strong in PvP, is precisely because of what she could output and then the way things work here. So we're going to go ahead and do another attack, and I'm going to choose a different formation to battle so I could show you guys my thoughts and processes into having to deal with that kind of formation. So it's going to put me out of my comfort zone, and I'm just going to see. Alright, so this is a prime example. It's about 20 away, which is, I'm okay with that because I get 4 attacks. And so I'm going to go ahead and go into this. This is going to be a doozy. I actually think I should be fine because they're using a Blood Rage formation, which means that it'll be 20 seconds before they'll be able to break through my front line. But the only thing to worry about is Kirito. So Kirito is actually going to be the most worrisome thing over a Zappy, for the primary reason that usually Kirito will be cast in an AI defense first. And so if he could zoom through my Zappy, that'll wipe me, and that'll greatly lower my chances of doing that. In order to deal with that, I could move Healer's Adjust to the bottom, but because my Stan is tankier and I only have to worry, and Big Bone can stun, I'm going to keep my formation as it is using the charge up here. And so we're going to go ahead and hop in, and I'm going to show you how to deal with, so these kinds of formations, what I want to do is I want to cast my Stan's leader ability as soon as possible. And that's all I want to do, is cast his leader ability as soon as possible. What Kirito is doing here is he's going to reduce all of their cooldowns so they could get their attacks off first. And so basically, he just did about half of my health here. And so I just want to click this, boom, and I got it off just as he did his attack that would have killed off my Stan. And so now I'm in a good position. And the other thing is, despite their Stan doing his leader ability as well, because Healer's Adjust got off a stun, what can happen sometimes is he'll continue doing the invincibility part, but it won't actually show up in the logs. And so he could still cast his leader ability and he'll use all of the 4 energy, but the invincibility portion will not go off. And so Zappy just did her cast, and so my Zappy is going to do her cast, and so now I'm good to do a finish. I'll cast my Zappy's leader ability here, and that'll be the finish. And so something I want to point out here is my Zappy had begun charging her attack, but I cast my leader ability first. And so if you cast your leader ability before she's reached past the halfway point, then the leader ability will interrupt her cast and put it on cooldown. But if you cast her leader ability after she's reached that halfway point, then it'll put it into a queue. So it just depends on how you're doing it. I could have put it into a queue to have been safe, but I honestly thought I'd just be able to wipe them all out with a single attack, and so that was my bad on my part. So my invincibility is gone, but luckily I don't have to worry about that. If I had failed and I only killed one character, then I would have cast Healer's Adjust as a taunt totem away. He is a good counter in the sense that I could put my totem away and melee characters will go off and attack that instead. And that's an alternative method I could do instead of using Stan's leader ability, say they were able to kill my Stan, that is something I could do instead. So here's another one I will do as well. This is for position 4, and he actually does not have a formation bonus. So I'm not exactly sure what that was for. Maybe he's going for the achievements here instead, and it doesn't really matter so much. And so I'm going to look at this, and right now the worrisome characters for me are going to be Kirito and BB here, and so they're going to come down and they're going to smash through my Stan really quickly, and then they're going to move on to Healer's Adjust. So what I could do is I could actually switch these two positions here to be safe, and then I don't have to worry about this, because what Sterling is going to do is she's going to cast her bleed, and it's going to probably hit both of these characters. They're going to bleed, but then my Windsummers is going to heal him and he'll be fine, but my Healer's Adjust will probably get smashed by these two characters. And so this is a risk I'm taking, putting him here, because they're likely going to both go down here and kill him really quick, but we're just going to go ahead and go, and because it's just me worrying about whether or not I can get my Stan's leader ability off here, which is pretty much a lot of the combat here. And so they're both going to come down and they're going to smash through my Healer's Adjust. I'm just going to cast this as soon as possible, and boom. Alright, so now Stan stunned them, and it'll be just long enough because my cooldown was reduced. My Zappy could get her attack off quickly, and so that was able to wipe out two of their characters here. And then I'm going to get my leader ability off, and then that was Kirito. He charged through the bottom. So if Kirito had been in a closer position rather than a spread out, if he had been closer, he would have targeted through the middle, because he would have been able to hit two characters this way rather than the tank and towards my Jaina instead. And so I'm just going to go ahead and show you if I could get them in a queue. Never mind, I'm just going to go ahead and kill him. So I just wanted to be safe. Refreshing. Alright, and so here we are. So he's actually using a non-meta positioning is very different. Tanks as well is very different. So he's a prime example of what you could do so much that it doesn't really matter. He's just using a charge up formation. And so there's one other thing here, is when the Zappy is in this back position, it's actually kind of a feint for a defensive position, and I'll show you why once I hop in here. Just because it could be kind of annoying to go up against if you're not prepared. And so if you look at this right here, Zappy is actually off screen right now, and so is my Jaina. So that is the only bad thing about this spread out formation when they're in the back corner, is whenever they do cast, their charge lines don't show up, or it'll be off screen, and so you can't tell that they are going. Luckily, I know the enemy is using a charge up formation, and so basically she'll move out of the ready position, and that'll be my only indicator of that she is charging. It'll be something I need to look out for, is once she moves out of this ready position with her wand down. And most characters will have their weapon or wand down, and then they'll move it if they're like this, if they're charging, or he'll raise his shield if he's charging. And so Uther is a good choice here, just because he could do a stun, and at 6-star level 6 he could do an AoE stun, and Healer's Adjust as well just has double stuns. And so what I'm gonna do, because I know my Stan has a couple of GCD stones on him as well, so I'm gonna be able to get my leader ability off right before he stuns. So as soon as my 4 is ability, I could cast this, and right as he does his slam stun. And so unfortunately I timed that incorrectly. I should have done it a little bit earlier. I waited a little bit, but because I waited, what ended up happening was all of my characters came down right as he did his stun, and if I had done it just even 0.25 seconds earlier, they would have come down and moved away, and it would only maybe stun my Stan. But if I check my characters, I do have that invincibility for 6.4 seconds, so it will be annoying because I won't be able to get that one attack off I needed for Zappy in time. But I'll go ahead and do this, and I'm going to kill their Zappy, and then I won't have to worry about her, because of Jaina will finish her off. So that was a clean sweep of all of my battles today, and a little bit onto the compositions. We talked through all the compositions, all of the formations you'll use, a little bit into what types of field positionings you'll use, the type of meta comps, and counterplay and stuff. So this was my how to do arena video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really spent a lot of time in preparing for this, and I did lose that day's worth of diamonds, but totally fine. I have a couple stored up here, and it was totally worth it bringing this to you guys. So I hope this helps you guys. Go ahead and post screenshots once you've completed a couple of ranks. I'd love to see these in the official Discord. We all would, actually. Especially once you hit that #1 position in Arena for the first time, because it's kind of nice the way the ranking system works. Oh, that was super weird. So I guess I'll have to do one more attack, because basically I attacked the first place person, and then 3 other players defeated him during that time. And so I'm going to have to do that again. But the way it works is once you hit #1 for the day, and then you drop down 50 places, you still get the rewards for the #1. It's not where you end up at the day. It's your best rank. And so it's very a nice system. This is my favorite kind of system in PvP, is exactly that. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you all in the next one.